Great, thanks. So now I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop. And there may be a slight delay, but you should see a graphic come up here. And what you're looking at is called a concept map. It's just kind of an alternative to displaying information in PowerPoint form. This whole map will be available for you online, linked. So one thing I wanted to highlight about this map is that there are associated resources that you can get to just by kind of clicking on these little icons. For example, here is a Applying for Undergraduate Summer Research handout. So I encourage you to kind of explore the map when you receive a link, and we will send that link out a couple days after the end of the webinar, so you can look for that towards the end of the week. So I guess I'm just going to start out here on, what are the basics of summer research? And so summer research programs in general are about 8 to 10 weeks in length, and they're usually located at a college or university campus, or sometimes at a private research lab or federal research lab setting. And it's entirely possible that your home institution hosts several summer research programs. And in general, you're working under the guidance of a faculty member, and you're probably also going to be interacting with some graduate students. The cohort of participants is usually around like 8 to 12 undergraduate students total, so they're usually small programs. And all the programs that we're going to talk about today and highlight today are paid. So they offer travel support and housing and a small but livable stipend. And you can find these programs in just really any geographic location and discipline that you can really possibly imagine. And they're fun. So these are a few pictures from an atmospheric science National Science Foundation RU program. RU stands for Research Experiences for Undergraduates. These programs generally offer experiences both in a fieldwork setting as well as a lab setting. So chance to kind of explore some different research settings outside of the classroom. Most of the time, these programs also provide some professional development activities. So for example, you may receive funding and support to go to a research conference, maybe even alongside some of your other summer research participants present the research that you did over the summer. Or there may be career development workshops and GRE prep workshops that occur throughout the summer research program. And then I've already mentioned that the programs are paid. The stipend is usually around $3,000 for a summer, but it can be variable based on the program. There are many sources of these programs. I want to highlight NSF and NASA because we work pretty closely with these agencies. So NSF is the National Science Foundation, and their programs are called RU's Research Experience for Undergraduates. And there are around 600 RUs across the country in various disciplines. So there are a lot of programs out there. And, again, stipend somewhere between $3,000 and $4,500 plus travel support to get there and housing. The housing is usually in a dormitory or other kind of shared housing situation. And all of these programs have different application processes and deadlines. We're coming right up on most of the deadlines. Most deadlines are in early February. Some are as late as, beginning or middle of March. And our website, Pathways to Science, is a great place to search for RUs, and I will do a demo search for you in a few minutes. Another place to look for summer research programs are really all the federal agencies, but just to highlight some of the NASA internships that are available. And just a little caveat here, I know a lot of people think that NASA is only about aerospace engineering and really nothing else. But NASA actually has hundreds of internships available every summer, and the disciplines do vary and include, chemistry, biology, physics, of course, many types of engineering, even some business and finance and education opportunities. So NASA is quite broad, actually, in its internship offerings. And they also offer a spring semester and a fall semester internship. So if summer isn't quite right for you, but you're interested in that, that's an opportunity as well. Again, the stipend is usually somewhere between $4,000 and $6,000. And the difference here at NASA is that instead of being on a college campus, you are traveling to one of the NASA research centers across the country and working with a NASA scientist who acts as your mentor. There's also a standard application and a standard deadline for most of the NASA internships. So, that's kind of the overview of what the programs are, how the programs are typically structured. And so you might be sort of thinking, well, why should I apply? Why should I be thinking about these programs? And there are several reasons. Summer research gives you this great academic foundation, and that it's helping you to build your research skills in a way that classroom studies may not be able to do. They are a great stepping stone if you're interested in graduate school. Not only are they helping you to build the research skills that are necessary for graduate school, but because you're often working alongside graduate students, and you might be at a campus that's different from your home campus, it really gives you kind of insight into what life as a graduate student could be like for you. These programs really help you to develop valuable faculty connections. They help you develop, those faculty references, and many students actually identify their future graduate advisor through a summer research program. Oops, I just lost my presentation. They provide, as you've probably seen here, great hands-on experience in the lab, in the field, and they also allow you they can be an opportunity to explore different fields of interest, even outside of your major or outside of the class offerings at your home campus. So, you may discover through a summer research program that you really like this certain sort of niche that you didn't even know about, or conversely, you may, go to an RU in one area and discover, I really don't want to be in that area. I want to go do something else, and that's great to figure out now before you've committed to, a 5-year doctoral program in that area. And then, of course, there's a chance to travel and make new friends and have a lot of fun. And there are lots of pictures here that you guys can explore on your own. So, jumping into the how should I apply, and we have quite a few handouts and helpful tips in this area. The one that I want to show you, which you'll get as a link when we follow up with you with these resources, is this one called Summer Research Experiences for Undergrads, because it has this nice timeline for applying. And I realize that this timeline starts in early fall, late summer, early fall, and here we are at the end of January. And so I don't want to intimidate you because it's not too late, even if you haven't started yet. There are some programs with, early March deadlines, and you still have time to put together a quality application. But this is a nice timeline to take a look at because of all the components in it. And it's a good timeline to pull out of your desk drawer or your virtual desk drawer, next summer. If you are a sophomore or junior and you will be eligible next summer. So this is a good timeline to look at and keep in mind. And then I want to kind of highlight a few other resources that we have and that you can look at in more depth. One is our handout on discussing summer research with your family, because we have found that this can be an important thing for students, is that it may be a little bit difficult to try to explain to your family why you need to leave home for the summer, to participate in one of these programs. And this handout kind of provides some helpful tips there. I also want to highlight two of the kind of common application components that you'll find when you're applying to these summer research programs. One is that you'll almost always be required to provide some sort of essay or personal statement. And again, we have some handouts here that are helpful on that front. And in general, I want to encourage you to make use of the resources that you have available as you're writing your essays and your personal statements, not to write them in a vacuum. So, please go over to your campus writing center and get some help from them. Tap into your peers, your fellow students who may be applying themselves and may have successfully applied and participated in these programs in the past couple of years. as well as your faculty members, your instructors, your academic advisors who, may have experience running these programs in the past and have a good idea of what makes a strong application. So as you're writing these things, tap into your resources. The other thing that I want to highlight is, again, we have a nice handout on getting strong letters of recommendation. And this is a question that we get a lot. Sort of how do I ask for a letter of recommendation, and how do I get a strong letter of recommendation? And it's tough if you're at a large school with large class sizes. You may not have those close relationships with faculty that make it easy to ask for a letter of recommendation. And the handout provides some suggestions on how to cultivate those relationships with faculty. And one thing that I'll say here is just that one of the best ways to do that is to attend office hours, which sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how many faculty members, never get students coming to their office hours. And you can, of course, go to office hours even if you don't have a question about your class content. You can go to office hours and talk about what you want to do in the future. Talk about selecting next year's courses. Talk about your summer research plans, your grad school plans. Ask what you need to do to prepare yourself for a career in your field. You can ask about professional associations you want to join, events, to consider attending. All these things help you just to build conversation and relationship with faculty and to start that networking that can really help you be successful. But when you're ready to ask for that letter of recommendation, you can bring some supporting materials with you as well. Bring your resume. You can bring a description of the work you've done with that faculty member, the courses you've taken with them. So, remember they're busy and they have a lot of students, and usually they will appreciate kind of a little summary reminder of their interactions with you in the past. And then bring a list of the programs that you want to apply to and talk a little bit about, what you want to gain from these programs. Of course, give them deadline information, but that packet of information will help that faculty member write a personalized letter rather than kind of a weak and generic letter. So that's my tip on that front. But what I want to do now before I pass it off to our guest speakers is to do a demo search for programs on our website for pathwaystoscience.org, because it's a really good place to start your search process. Let's see. I believe I actually closed out my window. Pathwaystoscience.org, and I'm going to go to our search page. We have about 1,500 different programs listed on our site. A lot of them, but not all of them, are summer research. I'm going to go straight to the advanced search option so that we can tailor the search a little bit for you guys. So I'm going to do undergraduate students. Because most of the summer research programs that are still accepting applications will be having a closing deadline pretty soon, I'm going to make this selection which highlights the programs with deadlines coming up in the next 45 days. So, the next month and a half or so. I'm going to choose summer research specifically. And then you could play around with different combinations of disciplines and keywords, as well as, geographic locations. I'm going to leave everything else blank. And you'll see we came up with 220 results. So you would want to filter some more, but you can see that there still are a lot of programs with deadlines upcoming, so that's great news. This little exclamation point means the deadline is in the next 2 weeks, I believe. So you can, take a look at that, but you'll see there are many options. The other thing while we're here on our website, in addition to the program search that I want to highlight, is our resource library and the toolbox within it. So I just sort of made a lot of references to handouts and suggested you look at them. This is where you can get to all of them in one place. We have some general handouts. We have some handouts on preparing your applications. Here's the one on getting strong letters of recommendation. We have some specifically about summer research. This is the one with the timeline in it that I showed you. So this is a great resource, and I hope you'll kind of cruise around and see what might be helpful to you. Great. So at this point, I'm going to stop talking and pass it over to our first guest speaker, who is Dr. Jeremy Rich, Assistant Professor of Marine Microbiology at the University of Maine. And I'm going to stop sharing my desktop while you talk.
Hi, this is Jeremy. I'm just going to talk for a little while and share some of my experiences through my career, specifically when I was an undergraduate and looking for research opportunities. So I did my undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is a large school. And I started out as a forestry major, and in my first year, I was a work-study student, and I pursued research opportunities in the Department of Forestry. And I worked in the Department of Forestry for about a year, and after that, I realized that I was becoming more interested in chemistry and biology, and that led me to soil science. And in the Department of Soil Science, so studying soils, I worked with a professor doing research, and he and I were studying soil development in forests of northern Wisconsin. So I would go out with him, and we'd hike and dig soil pits and collect soil samples. And then from there, I did a research education for undergraduate experience program, an REU program. And so my previous two research experiences, I think, were critical for me to get into the REU program. Because I do think some of them are competitive. So those letters of recommendation that Liv talked about are really important. So I did an RU program, and that was in Oregon with Oregon State University. And I was in a group of undergraduates, 12 other undergraduates, and we lived at the Forest Research Station for about 10 weeks. And in that program, we learned about different aspects of forest science research. We worked with professors to help them on their research projects. So we got exposed to a number of different types of approaches to study forests and forest ecology. And then also part of that program was to develop an independent research project. And so the later half of the program, we were doing our own research and collecting data. And then at the end, we had to give a presentation and turn in a scientific written report about our independent research. So professionally, that RU was very important for me. At that point in my life, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for my career, and I thought maybe going to graduate school would be a good idea. I was interested in research, but I wasn't sure. But going into that RU program, I came out of it convinced that I did want to pursue going to graduate school. And also the RU program helped me develop my interest and focus. Turned out the research project I did was not what I wanted to pursue for graduate school. So getting that diverse experience is important for developing your interests. I thought Liv gave a nice presentation and talked about the reasons why you want to do an RU program. One thing that wasn't on the list is lifelong friends. In fact, in my case, I met my wife in this RU program. And there was another couple that also met each other in the RU program. So I can't guarantee that you'll find your partner for life in the RU program, but in my case, that's what happened. So very important professionally as well as just in terms of a life experience. So that was the RU program, and from there I went on to I finished my senior year at the University of Wisconsin and went on to graduate school, and then eventually became a professor. But I guess in terms of advice, if you are an undergraduate looking for research experience, is to go for it. Figure out professors you like, professors that you've had classes with. If you feel like you're interested in their work, go talk to them. So I did go to a large school, University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I had no problem meeting professors at a large school. And actually, I think it worked in my favor in that there was a lot of different professors doing a lot of different research, and you could seek out those professors and talk to them and potentially get involved with their research. And then all of a sudden, you're in this really small world where you're interacting with the professor. And so part of that is just not being afraid to talk to professors you don't know about who you might be interested in working with. Another thing that Liv talked about are the letters of recommendation, and those are critical. And so for letters of recommendation, the better you know your professor. So I can write better letters of recommendation the more I know the student. So that comes with communication. That comes with getting into professor's lab and doing research with the professor. So it's all about getting to know the professor and he or she getting to know you, to know your strengths and weaknesses. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. So the more you can get to know your professors, I think the better off you'll be in the future in terms of finding research opportunities. So should I just continue going on, or are there questions?
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll pause there and let Cindy have the floor, and then we'll come back around for questions. But thank you for your input there, and I think we should add that to the map. Don't you think? Live lifelong.
Well, maybe not. It's not maybe not the most professional thing to put on the website.
Oh, I think that would be fine. Get your hopes up for these programs. So our next guest speaker is Dr. Cindy Layton. She's a postdoctoral researcher at Stony Brook University, and I'm going to share my screen again and bring up Cindy's presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Layton. I received my PhD here at Stony Brook University in 2014. And what I wanted to do was to take you through a little bit of a summary of my journey up until this point where now I'm a postdoctoral researcher. You can go to the next slide, Liv. Thank you. So I got my bachelor's degree in biochemistry at the University of New Haven, where my first research immersion experience was actually not even close to biology. I started out actually in the field of psychology. And the way that this happened was that initially I went into college thinking I was going to actually go into chemical engineering, and then after looking through the curriculum, I kind of got very intimidated. So I quickly walked away from that. But I had taken an elective course in psychology during, I believe, my freshman year at some point. And the professor who I went and spoke to frequently, we realized that my major interest was to learn research methodology, and that I was really interested in how research sort of played a role in how we built the current knowledge that we have about anything. And so she said, this might not be the specific topic that you want to learn about, but, you can come to my lab and work with me, and you can get an idea of how research works. And so I started studying language and reading comprehension, and I was interested in how bilingual people essentially understand the things that they read. And while this was I wanted to highlight that this was sort of like an opportunity that just arose just out of what Liv was sort of talking about earlier, which was going to office hours and seeing your professors and just talking to them about, your interests and what you're curious about. And sometimes that may lead to an undergraduate research experience that's very fruitful. And for me in particularly, it was very productive because during that time, I learned that I loved working with people because I was interviewing participants for our studies. And I learned that I really liked research. I just kept getting more and more curious. But what I found that I didn't really kind of address in that experience was the fact that I really wanted to study something in biology because that was my major. And so sort of serendipitously, through talking through some other people, through networking, I found a different position at the Yale School of Medicine in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. And there I was doing actually clinical research. So I was immersed in the world of talking to physicians and talking to research personnel and collecting samples and picking up, blood and serum and all kinds of things, and then bringing them to the researchers. And so I was sort of like in the middle of just kind of like an office that managed every single clinical study that was going on in our department. And that experience was very important to me because it taught me that I didn't really want to be a physician. I kind of enjoyed my conversations with the research scientists more. I kind of enjoyed asking them, like, so what are you going to do with the blood now, and what are you going to look at, and why is that important, and why does it matter for that study? And so through that experience, I then realized that I wanted to be closer to the bench. And so I was lucky enough to land a position at Stony Brook through, at the time, was called a Summer Research Institute, an SRI program, through another program called AGAP. And that is probably a very close experience to something that you would find would happen if you went to a research experience or through an REU type of experience. So in that internship, I got the opportunity to leave the University of New Haven for the summer and come to Stony Brook here in Long Island, New York. And it was the first time that I actually was part of a lab at a bench doing molecular work. I learned how to pipette. I learned how to do Western blots. I learned how to do all kinds of technical things in the lab, working with proteins and looking at brain tissue. And that's where it kind of all started clicking for me, because I had this interest in the brain for a long time, and I knew I wanted to do more specific biology type of experiments. And that's where I sort of fell in love with my field. Interestingly, it was through this experience that in that same lab, I actually ended up joining that lab when I became a graduate student at Stony Brook. But what I wanted to highlight about that particular experience was that I went into Stony Brook sort of thinking that maybe this is a place I want to go to graduate school. So one piece of advice that I have for you is look for summer programs where you are sort of also interested in going there potentially as a graduate student, because that means that you're establishing connections with the people that might not only recommend you for graduate school, but also they might just, have a lot of power in whether they admit you or not. In my case, I was lucky enough that I actually interned in the lab of the admissions person, the admissions chair, for the department that I ended up going to, for the program I ended up going to. So for me, it was sort of very easy for me to talk to people around me while I was there and ask to the students, which program are you part of? Do you like the program? Do you like the curriculum? Do you do rotations? Do you get to go and travel and go to conferences and talk about your work? What other kind of training do you get? And once I started to get immersed in that world, when I started to go to graduate school interviews, I started asking all these other questions at other universities, and I sort of found that Stony Brook was actually the best place for me. So I was actually very thankful that I ended up sort of serendipitously ended up at Stony Brook and as part of that program. So one other type of research experience that might be relevant, and Liv, you can go to the next slide. Sorry, there should have been an animation in the last slide.
I'm sorry, I think because I turned this into a PDF, it might have, yeah.
Oh, okay, that's okay. So what I was going to say was after this particular experience, I actually applied to a program through the National Institutes of Health called the Introduction to Cancer Research Careers. And through that program, I actually went there as a post-bac, meaning that I had finished my bachelor's degree, but I wasn't yet part of my graduate program because that was going to happen later on in the semester, so in September. So I basically had this summer where I wasn't qualified to do regular summer internship programs because most of those programs, in terms of eligibility, you have to be an enrolled undergraduate student. And so by doing a post-bac, I was able to do additional molecular and cellular training at the bench. And this time I actually got the chance to do it at the National Institutes of Health, which was an amazing experience to be able to be in such a huge laboratory environment. It's a really prestigious place to work, and you are immersed with, you are surrounded by so many different types of scientists and topics and things. And so I did that for that summer. And then eventually I went to graduate school here at Stony Brook and started my graduate program. So all of these different experiences that I had were very important for me, not only to get a sense of how research works and how the world of research functions, but also to kind of fine-tune my interests. So like I said, I started out in like a completely different area in psychology and then eventually went to clinical research, and then I sort of, at each one of these points, I defined what I want to do. So that's one reason to encourage you to look for these opportunities, because they will help you also determine whether that is something for you or not. And both of those types of experiences are very important. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So a couple of tips that I had in terms of your application package, just to kind of keep it brief, I bullet pointed them here. I actually have two students of mine that are applying for summer programs right now, so I actually kind of had a little bit of this already in the front of my mind. I think it's important to think of your application as like a package or like a story that you get to tell about yourself. And in doing that, you get to highlight everything that's like your best, course or your best grade or your best experience or your most relevant this and that, to make a really strong case about why you're a really good candidate. So don't underestimate even little things, anything as small as, I went to see my professor during office hours to talk to them about this, that, and the other. Those are all little things that you should explain when you write your personal statement, because it tells the people reading this application that you're someone who's willing to have discussion about science, or you're someone who's willing to look for resources. Those are the types of things that they're looking for in these applications. I also think that it's important for you to be very clear on what your interest in a specific field is, because sometimes, just to give you an example, earlier this week, one of my undergraduates said to me, "Oh, I'm interested in regenerative medicine." And to me, that's kind of like so broad. You could tackle regenerative medicine from so many different perspectives, right? So I needed her to be a little more specific, and I said to her, well, is regenerative medicine like, pharmacology? Is it looking for a drug? Is it looking to regenerate up tissue? Is it working with stem cells? And once I started asking those questions, she was able to go back and be more specific about what kinds of things she's really interested in. So try to be a little specific about the kinds of things you want to get out of your research experience, because often those are the things that they will look for in pairing you up with a potential mentor if you don't have the opportunity to pick one. I also think it's important for you to go ahead and research the program and find out what kind of professors you would like to work with based on their work and, any information that you find out about them, and you can mention that in your applications. There's always some sort of mechanism for you to do that, either in your statement or through the application itself. I think it's important, going back to the message about this being a package, it's important for your recommenders to be informed about what it is that you're saying in your personal statement or in your application as a whole. So if you're saying that you have a very strong mathematics background and that you want to do modeling and that you have computer science background and, you want to do coding, if that's sort of like your package or the strength that you're bringing into your application, you might want to tell your recommenders that they should talk about how you were able to model some sort of protein in their lab, or that you were able to, do something that sort of applies those strengths into the recommendation that they're writing. I think it's also important for the students when they're applying for this to have someone look over your essay to make sure that they covered the right content and that they hit the key points. I think a lot of times I see applications submitted where the students didn't necessarily might have had someone look over and tell them, maybe you should elaborate a little more on this or that, or maybe you should not have included this. And I think those are like small editing things that if you just have someone else look at, they might be very, good pieces of advice for you to enhance your application. I know that there are students out there who may have had certain challenges or things that happen throughout the semesters, and that might affect your grades. If that is something that applies to you, you might want to use some space within your personal statement to talk about this and how you may have overcome it or how that might have been a struggle, because that's something that the reviewer should take into consideration when they're looking at your application. I think one other thing that might enhance your application is to definitely identify the resources that the particular program might offer. So, for example, there's programs that have GRE prep course during the summer that you're there. They have, poster design competitions. They have all these different things. If those are things that you think would be really helpful to you, tell them that. Make sure you tell them that you are very interested in taking advantage of everything that the program has set out to do, because that, again, will make your application stand out, because it shows them that here's a student who understands that they really want to reap the benefits of what they offer. A lot of these programs, especially with RUs, a lot of times these are recruitment programs. What does that mean? It means that the programs are put there by the institution because this is the best way for them to get to sort of interview you, if you will, during that summer experience. So that if you're interested in going to graduate school there, they will have already had a chance to assess how you work and how productive you can be while you've been part of one of their own faculty's lab. And so you might want to explain in your application also why this particular institution may potentially be a great place for graduate training in the future. I wouldn't go at length about it, but I would definitely say, Michigan State, for example, is a great electrical engineering university, and it's a department has many experts in the X field. If that's something that you're going into, I would definitely explain also those points. And I think in general, you want to walk away from your application knowing that you made the strongest argument possible for why you would benefit from that particular program. And I would say that that is probably the best advice I can give you, because that's the same effort I put into every single application that I've put together myself. And so I always make sure I have at least 3 other people, read it. I make sure my recommenders are reading it, my advisor, anyone else that can get their hands on it. I always want people to give me feedback and make sure I address everything I set out to address in that application. And so that would be all for me. I would be happy to take any questions.